Hey everybody, welcome back for another magical movie review with me, Magic by Molly. I'm really excited to bring you today's magical movie review and a little bit sad at the same time because it is now our last Disney princess film for this series of magical movie review. So it's going to be a couple weeks before we start the next series. So just to wrap it up, we'll do today's magical movie review and then we'll do kind of a magical recap of our magical movie review and then keep on going because this has been really fun and I want to keep it going. I tried to go full on Moana today. My hair is crazy always, so that's probably pretty Moana, but went with a natural colored makeup look today and put on my most Moana looking shirt I could find. It's actually from the Disney Pride collection last year, and it's actually turned inside out because it says on the inside, what does it say inside? Believe in love. But I actually like the inside of the shirt better than like the regular outside because the inside of the shirt is actually more colorful where the flowers and everything on the inside are more neutral. And then the lettering is in gold. Just flipped it inside out. Let me know if you guys do that too with any of your favorite shirts. If you haven't joined a magical movie review before, we break everything down into 6 major sections. We've got our magical recap, where I try to bring you the synopsis of the movie as quickly as I possibly can. We also do magical moments and enchanting efforts, and you could probably guess from context clues that those are things that I really enjoyed about the movie or things that were magical moments for me, or things that I thought could have been done better. Then we also designate a VMP, or a very magical person, so the person that I enjoyed the most, that I thought brought the most to the story. I also do my rankings of our series movies so far, so in this case we'll rank all of the Disney princess films. And then last but not least, for all of my other nerds out there who like to understand where we are culturally with the story, where things come from, you can hang out for the nerd alert at the very end, so that'll be the last section for today. So we'll just jump right in with our magical recap. This one, keeping it short, sweet, to the point, and then we'll dive right into our magical moments. Magical recap, here we go. In the beginning, Maui steals the heart of Te Fiti. Te Fiti starts to die, and then the earth starts to die with her. Slowly over time, we see the effects of that death reach Motunui, island of Moana. Moana, as a child, is chosen by the ocean to restore the heart of Te Fiti, but her father, being super scared, barely even lets her touch the ocean. Moana goes off anyway because she finds out her people used to be voyagers, so it's her past, and she knows it's her destiny to complete this mission. She finds Maui on a deserted island. They bond and shit and go to Te Fiti. They save the day, save the island, and her people continue the tradition of wayfinding. I mean, it's a super simple plot, but I don't hate it. Just diving right into magical moments. Of course, the animation is absolutely beautiful. The water is nothing like I've ever seen before at the point of 2016. And it's also nice to see another change in pace from a Disney perspective. Which, while there's quite a bit of controversy around the film and the cultural references that they're making, it's still a step in the direction of creating a more culturally diverse princess group. And it also kind of opens eyes of people who aren't really familiar with that culture to understand it a little bit more, or at least get their toes wet, so to speak. So that was a magical moment for me, just kind of overall umbrella, but kind of just talking about specific moments. I really felt like I got kind of in my feels during the scene with Moana and her grandmother showing her that they come from voyagers and kind of telling her that restoring the heart of Te Fiti is her destiny, in combination with like her grandmother passing away, the scene where they find out that she's sick, and so her grandmother's like, you have to go, like, I'll be with you always, but like, you have to do this. And so she runs off, starts collecting her things, and then her mom shows up and doesn't even try to fight her on it. Like, she helps her pack and like sends her on her way. I think it's such a powerful moment because up until then, her dad has been the one kind of projecting his insecurities about his past and his fears onto Moana, and has prevented her from voyaging or wayfinding up until this point. Her mother knows that ultimately this is the right thing to do. They're already seeing the coconuts start to decay, like they have to do something. And she, of course, like has that instinct to know that Moana is powerful enough, and gives Moana her encouragement and motherly love to say, you know what, like, go for it. So that was a really powerful moment for me. And then like continuing on, when she gets into the boat and all the lights go out on the island, and then you see the stingray come out, which is the grandmother's, essentially her spirit animal, and like helps guide Moana over the reef. Like, I almost lose it every time. I'm not a huge movie crier. I'm crying more and more at movies as I get older, but that one gets me pretty close to tears, because one, Moana's not there when her grandmother dies, which is sad. I know that she wants to be, but like, grandmother doesn't even skip a beat to be with Moana and help guide her on her way. So that was a really big magical moment for me. I thought this the very first time that I watch it, and every single time I appreciate it even more. In the beginning, when they're setting up the character development and the plot, there's no romantic plot line whatsoever, which is, in my opinion, incredibly refreshing. Like, they're focusing more on the mythology, they're focusing more on mission, like what we're setting out to accomplish, more than trying to find Moana a boyfriend. I'm not an ooey gooey romantic person anyway, so to me that's fine. Like, I appreciate a good love story, but I don't need it for it to be a good movie or a good story. And I was talking about that with a couple people. Sorry, you got goop in my eye now. I was talking about this with a couple of friends of mine a couple weeks ago, and they were like, oh, well, of course it makes sense. Like, she's a kid. But they were annoyed that Elsa didn't have a love interest, or saying that Elsa not having a love interest as an adult means that she's a lesbian, which is a whole other thing. But my thing is like, okay, Moana being a child really isn't that big of an argument, only because literally all of these other princesses, especially our early princesses, are like between 12 and 16. And Moana, I think, is around the age 16, is like from what I'm reading. It seems pretty on par for her to have a romantic interest when it comes to Disney princesses, but they choose not to. They choose that that's not an important part of the story, and I applaud the writers for that. Another magical moment for me is, of course, the introduction of Maui into this story. I think having a big tattooed kind of brawn of a man is just an interesting introduction as far as like male icons go. I mean, all of the good guys have been like tall, skinny white men. This guy, while having his faults, is like a big, burly, like curly head, long haired man, and he's the good guy. Like, you don't have to be super skinny to be the good guy, which I think is amazing. I know that that has been somewhat of a controversy within the Polynesian culture, because they think that it is a misrepresentation of men from that ethnic group, which absolutely, I mean, that's what they've been known for, so I get it. But for me personally, I think it's great to see men and women be represented in all different body types as good and evil, and in all aspects of the story, protagonist, antagonist. I think we should be seeing all body types, because it really doesn't matter what you look like. It just matters who you are as a person. But I just appreciate him being this big burly man, because really it's a representation of like him being a demigod, being powerful and a hero. But also, I'm sure it's a little bit of just like personifying The Rock in the cartoon. Like, he's just a big dude that's tatted up, so they kind of wanted to bring that into the story as well, because Disney is fairly notorious for making their animated characters reflect the actors that are voicing them a little bit. It's not every time, and it's not really on a consistent basis, but if you like look at the characters side by side, a lot of times they kind of try to take specific features from the actor and like plug it in. So I just love the introduction of his character, and he's just hysterical. Like the You're Welcome song is amazing. Another magical moment for me, which was just something that I realized as I was watching it and kind of towards the end of the movie, is that there's not really a villain if you think about it. Like, of course we have Tamatoa, who's the big crab that has taken Maui's hook, and like the monster realm, or realm of monsters, I can't remember how they reference it. So like that's kind of like the evil side. But even then, he's just like a hoarder. I don't know. Like, he's not really a villain to the storyline. Lava Monster, of course, turns out to be Tafiti, just a woman scorned, essentially. So I think really the villain in the story is the result of treating people and the earth poorly. And like the results that can come from that is kind of the villain or the antagonist of the story. And of course, like, that evil is put to rest when the heart of Tafiti is restored or put into the lava monster. Like, showing kindness ultimately is the hero, or the thing that's going to bring peace. And I think that that is an incredible message to young kids that are watching. Like, one, take care of the planet. Like, quit taking shit off of islands or trees. Like, when I was a camp counselor, I used to tell my kids, because they would just run around the woods and like we would pass a tree and they would just start like ripping leaves off the tree. And I'm like, how would you feel if someone just came up and started trying to rip your fingers off? Like, essentially, like, you need to treat the earth and the things around you with respect, because these trees are providing us shade, so we're not like getting sunburned or sweating our butts off. It's all full circle in how we treat each other. So that in particular just really resonated with me. Now, I honestly had a hard time coming up with enchanting efforts about the story itself. I think really the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I probably comes with just learning more about voyaging in the Polynesian culture. When we get to the end, Moana saves the day, great, like, hurrah. Then the family, or the villagers, they decide to voyage on to the next island. I think it's great. I think that it's great that they are finally kind of getting back into their heritage and continuing their legacy. But what happens to the island that they were just on? Like, did they leave some people behind? Or did everybody go? And now the island's just empty? I would really like to see kind of a Moana 2, because I feel like that would be a really good opportunity for them to answer questions about wayfinding and voyaging and kind of diving into that, but also like maybe providing more cultural context to the story. Because while I think it's great that Disney is taking on this new culture to emphasize and really bring light to and share stories about, they're really just picking out like the fun parts. You know what I mean? Like the outfits and the tropical part of Polynesian culture and the dancing and the hair and all of that, which is fantastic. It's beautiful and I love it. There's just also so much to learn about Polynesian culture that I think they would have a really great opportunity to do that in Moana 2, especially when it comes to voyaging. I think that there's a lot of adventure that comes along with that. So I think, and maybe they will, I don't know. I just remembered, I didn't write it down, another enchanting effort for me. Pua was one of my favorite characters. He's so cute, and he's only in it for maybe a collective 5 minutes. He is such a cute little pig, and they just didn't do anything with him. She was gonna take him out on the boat with her the first time. Why didn't he go the second time on the full adventure? I guess Maui would have tried to eat him. But still, I don't even think there's any Disney shorts out there about Pua. And I think that's a missed opportunity, because they sell a lot of merchandise for Pua, so you know he's popular. You know people want to see more of Pua. So that's really it for Enchanting Efforts, I know that that part wasn't really that exciting this week, but I just genuinely couldn't think of a whole lot that like left big question marks for me personally, or things that I just didn't like about the film. But I did learn a lot about the reactions and things that Disney could do a lot better on from the origin aspect, so stick around for that part if you're interested. Now, for the VMP, this one was hard because I genuinely liked multiple characters throughout the film. I am going to choose the ocean as my VMP, even though the ocean, of course, doesn't have any lines. It is the consistent character throughout the film. I think it ebbs and flows, no pun intended, but also kind of pun intended. Finds Moana in the beginning. It plays with her just like a child would, and also presents itself again when she's older and like comforts her, and it helps her and Maui throughout the story. Without the ocean, she would have drowned like 10 times. In the moments after she and Maui try to restore the heart the first time, and she's ready to give up, it doesn't really fight her on it. Like, she hands him the, I call it him, and I don't know, it could be a her, it could be non-binary, I don't know. Takes the stone, drops it to the bottom, and then kind of brings her the spirit of her grandmother and lets her kind of work through stuff emotionally, and then lets her dive down and get it. I don't know, I just think it plays such a big part of the story in making sure that the story keeps going and that Moana keeps going. And also just the fact that it's water and it has its own character, it has its own emotions, and it has its own comedic relief, and it provides so much to the plot and the motivation of the story is, I think, why I ultimately chose it as my VMP. When it comes to the nerd alert, which is what I've been calling this section, it's been very eye-opening for the culturally diverse princesses. For me, especially as a white woman who has been, of course, blinded to a lot of things in our world, a bunch of different cultures and perspectives, and so I definitely want everybody to take this with a grain of salt, because there is so much more that I have to learn. I probably could and should spend many more hours diving into Polynesian culture and learning a lot more about it, and I'm even more interested in it now because of Moana. So I want to start there because I want to say that I appreciate Disney's effort to do that. That being said, there is a lot of missed opportunity when it comes to Moana. While there's a lot of it that's built into truth, there's not one particular point of origin for Moana. There is a Maui demigod from their mythology that they pull from. There are, of course, things that are exaggerated and things that aren't explained very well. So for example, like we talked about earlier, from Maui, there's a lot of Polynesian families that don't want to show the movie to their sons because they don't want their sons to be brainwashed into thinking that everybody thinks that Polynesian men are big boned or fat, which I perceived Maui as muscular and thick and strong and beautiful in his own way. I absolutely can appreciate that that is a perception that could be portrayed by that particular character. Of course, with mythology, there's a lot of different versions and different stories, so with the song You're Welcome from the film, that's kind of Disney's way of giving you the backstory of Maui. In some truth, they're kind of just retelling all of the many tales about Maui and what he's been able to do and the gifts that he's given to humanity through song, which I think is cool. I think from what I've read, the only two things that are prominent in the creation stories from Maui is his gift of fire to humans and his ability to lasso the sun and make days longer for humans in the summer and shorter in the winter. Those are the two that are consistent. The others, of course, are like hit or miss as far as how prominent they are and how true they are. So I think that they may have been able to take a little bit more time on that one, but I'll post some more resources for you there to learn more about the backstory of Maui. I did find it extremely interesting that, of course, the Pacific Islands, thousands of years ago, there was such a thing as voyaging, and Pacific Islanders were the ones that were responsible for traveling and colonizing those different islands, which previously had not been credited to them because they were thought of as primitive and not capable of doing that. So from what I can tell, as recent as like the 1970s, they credited other people with colonizing, where Pacific Islanders were the ones to do that first. Where that history ties in with Moana specifically, and I'm looking down at my notes because of course there's just a lot and I can't memorize it all. There's something called the long pause, which is a huge gap in timeline of like no voyaging. So in Western Polynesia, the islands closest to Australia and New Guinea, they were colonized around 3,500 years ago. But then the islands of Central and Eastern Polynesia were not settled until about 1,500 years ago. So there's a big gap of almost 2,000 years where we really don't know a whole lot about what happened then, why those people stopped voyaging or stopped trying to travel from island to island to see if they were inhabitable. There have been several theories related to like El Niños and changes in the stars that make navigation more difficult and things like that. There have been several theories. So when Disney decides to take a stab at kind of a Polynesian princess and coming up with a fun theory for what the reason behind the long pause was, they build a team of Polynesians or people that are familiar with the culture into the, I don't know how you pronounce this word, but it's like Oceanic Trust, Oceanic, am I saying that wrong? I probably am, which is fine, but definitely correct me, to try to make the movie as culturally correct as possible. But there's a lot of people that say just because you have a team of people to say that you did that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a Polynesian story. It's still a whitewashed story to make it more mainstream entertaining, which I definitely believe is true, especially with the only food that we really see them eat or even hear them sing about or talk about is coconuts, which I think is another one of those points that I was making earlier. They pick and choose what they want to exaggerate on for the purposes of storytelling. Just because they're islanders doesn't mean that that's all they eat is coconuts. I know that they reference fish a couple times, but I think that's just one of those things that of course Disney's gonna pick and choose and just steer into the skid on. I also didn't know, and I'm glad that I know now, that coconut is also considered a racial slur. Some people find it appropriate to call Pacific Islanders or people of Polynesian descent that word. And there's a group of characters within the story that are dressed as coconuts. And so I could see why that might be distasteful on Disney's part. And if this board of people were truly involved in that portion, I feel like that might have been avoided. So I don't really know. I'm not really sure what happened there, but it's definitely something that I was not aware of because of how I grew up. And of course, this information is whitewashed and not shared with somebody like me. So definitely know now, and I'm going to make sure to make a point of that. So there's a lot that we could have done better. Probably a few enchanting efforts learned now that I've dived deeper into the origins of Pacific Islanders and voyaging and Maui, but that doesn't mean that there's not more opportunities to do better later on. I'd love to hear more from you guys. I'll share the resources that I found. I try to avoid resources like big newspapers like New York Times or Vanity Fair or anything like that. Most of the resources that I choose from are like Smithsonian or from an educational resource I try to use before I use anything else. But I will tag everything that I use down below. Definitely feel free to read those. If you have any resources that I don't have access to or it didn't just show up in my initial research, absolutely feel free to share those with me. But I think this is the tip of the iceberg for me on a lot of these Disney princesses, to learn more about cultural appropriation and exaggeration for the sake of storytelling and entertainment. We'll talk about that a little bit more in my Disney Princess Magical Movie Review recap, which will be coming to you next week. But before you exit out of YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Definitely go back and watch more of those magical movie reviews and let me know what you think. If you think that there's opportunities that I'm missing as I'm reviewing these movies, absolutely let me know. I want to learn more and make adjustments to make the magical movie reviews more entertaining and more beneficial for you guys. Thank you all for your support. This has been a fantastic first run for me, and I will see you next week. Bye!